When you go to the very excellent Mazda website and check out their range of SUVs, you'll see that they have no less than 9 in their lineup, one for every segment of the market. In fact, there's an SUV for some segments that don't even exist. The baby of the range is, ironically, also the oldest in the whole lineup, the Mazda CX-3. Good afternoon and welcome to Four Wheels and a Seat. This is my channel where every week I review a brand new car in a pretty straightforward, easy to understand way. If you're looking for a new car and you want to do a bit of research, this is a good place to start. To make sure you don't miss a review though, click the subscribe button down below the notification bell, and if you enjoy the video, give me a like as well. Thanks very much. The CX-3 has been around for about 10 years now and hasn't really had a major overhaul in that time, but it is still one of Mazda's most popular cars. In fact, they sold nearly 16,000 of them in Australia alone just last year. But is this an SUV? Because while they call it one, I don't know, it just doesn't really feel like one. I last reviewed this car back in 2022. It was a entry-level max model. They don't actually call it that anymore. The nomenclature has changed. The entry level is now called a Pure, and this car is a mid-spec Evolve, so it has a few more nice touchy-feely bits to it. But outwardly, the two cars look pretty similar. The Kodo design is strong in this car. Having a look at the back of the car, we've got the boot. It's still pretty small at just 264 litres, although Mazda claim if you lower the rear seats and fill it full of water up to the roof, you'll get over 1,000 litres worth. Why you'd want to do that, I don't know, but good to know you can. Up front and under the bonnet sits a naturally aspirated 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol engine that outputs 110 kilowatts of power and 195 newton meters of torque. Those numbers sound pretty good, but I have to say that in the metal it doesn't actually feel that great, and it does feel just a little bit underpowered. It's pretty fuel efficient too, clocking in at just 6.3 litres per 100 kilometres on a combined cycle. Power goes to the front wheels only via a 6-speed automatic transmission. The interior of the CX-3 hasn't really changed much since I last reviewed it, but here in the Evolve, it does feel quite a bit more plush, especially with this band of suede across the center of the dashboard here. Yeah, it's a nice little premium touch and feels really nice. And I like these synthetic leather seats with suede accents as well. They're really comfortable. This is a really nice seat. Unfortunately, there's no electric adjustment or lumbar adjustment, but it's still a really nice, cushy kind of seat for a car at this price point. White though is a bit of a danger zone because it's not going to look this good for long. Sitting in the center of the dash, of course, is the 8-inch touchscreen. Well, it's touch sometimes. It's touch when the car is stationary. As soon as you go above about 3 kilometers per hour, you can only use the center screen using the jog wheel down here on the lower console, and that's a bit of a safety feature that Mazda have added in. And that's fine for the regular MZD native software, which is pretty old now. It's been around for about a dozen years, but you know what? It still works okay. There's native navigation, which is all right, but the good thing is now we have wireless Apple CarPlay in this car, and although it is a bit of a nightmare to use with a jog wheel, it's very convenient having it there, and when the car is stopped, obviously then you can use the touch functions, but Apple CarPlay is really not designed to be used with the jog wheel. If you're an Android user, I'm sorry, you're still going to have to use a USB cable. Climate controls, very basic setup underneath that, and it is actually proper climate control, not just air conditioning, so that's a nice touch. Down here in the lower console, 2 USB-A ports. There's an SD card slot here so you can update this car's navigation. And then the lower console, pretty straightforward. We've got that jog wheel for the center console screen and the switch for the sport mode, which is really this car's only other drive mode than normal. Under the armrest here is sort of a combo cup holder and storage space with a nice little mechanical cup holder action that they both flick up when you push the button, and if you have them pushed down, then obviously you have a little bit more storage space there. A tiny little bit of storage behind the furthest back cup holder behind that, and then we've got a nice armrest here with stitching and some more of that synthetic leather. Up in front of the driver is a head-up display on a little screen that pops out of the top of the dash, and the advantage of that is that it works fine with polarized sunglasses, so you can see it really clearly all the time. The dash itself is a pretty basic affair as it was in the previous CX-3. They have reorganized some of the dials here a little bit and changed them around, but the functionality is pretty well identical. So we've got a big analog tacho here in the middle with a digital speedo in the bottom right hand corner, and the fuel gauge, and there's no temperature gauge, but you know, if you really need to look at that anyway, I'm sure the car will tell you when it's overheating. Steering wheel straight out of the Mazda parts bin, pretty straightforward. Not a lot of controls on here because there's no adaptive cruise control. We've just got regular dumb cruise control, so controls for that are here, plus the sound system and your hands-free phone. There's no paddle shifters here to change gears manually. You can do that though with the gear shifter in the middle. Seating position, look, as I mentioned, it doesn't really feel like an SUV because we're kind of low to the ground here. I mean, we're higher than you would be in a Mazda 2, but it does feel like I'm driving a Mazda 2. And I mean, the two cars are built off the same platform, so that does kind of make sense. But this is sort of like a Mazda 2 that just rides up a little bit higher. Visibility at the front is not fantastic just because the bonnet sort of slopes away quite quickly, so you can't really see the front corners of the car. This car has front and rear parking sensors though, which makes life a little bit easier. But visibility in the cabin otherwise is pretty good, except in the blind spots where the rear sills on the doors there are just a little bit higher. But visibility through the rear vision mirror is okay. And the wing mirrors here are actually nice and big. They're proper SUV size mirrors, so you do have a good view there. And there's blind spot monitors in the wing mirrors too. So as I mentioned, just a little more power in this car would be nice. It can get a little bit sort of noisy and feeling a little bit coarse even when you put your foot down, and not a lot happens. I mean, look, there's adequate power for around town, but you know, a little more would be good. And the engine does get a little bit noisy. Mazdas for a long time had a reputation as being a little bit noisy in the cabin, and generally they're pretty good these days. This one might be an exception to that rule. You do hear that kind of whiny engine noise as the revs build up, and look, it's not too obtrusive, it's just there. Is it a turn-back car, a car so good looking that you have to turn around and look at it after you've parked it? Well, I mean, Mazda's Kodo design language still looks really good even a dozen years on, but they're kind of everywhere. So would you turn around and look at the CX-3 after you've parked it? Maybe not. So despite its age and fairly basic setup, the Mazda CX-3 is probably one of the, if not the best, subcompact SUVs you can buy. It is extremely well made. Mazdas are put together absolutely beautifully. And although it does cost a little more than some of its rivals, I don't think it's a purchase you would regret. So if you're in the market, make sure you take a Mazda CX-3 for a test drive.